So in paper 2, our strategy is to work on question 1 to question 5. This will be the way forward. This will be the easiest way to get a pass. So question 1 to question 5. So looking at the question, it says the diagram below shows triangle DEF with these points D, E, right? So now they say, first question, 1.1, determine the gradients of DE for 2 marks. So all we have to do is use the the gradient formula. So the gradient formula is the difference in the y's divided by the difference of the x's, okay? And so we're going to take point 2 as being the point D and point 1 as being point E as seen in the diagram. So here the M stands for gradient. So all we're going to do is substitute these points into the formula and get the gradient. Concentrate and do this. It is best to put the negatives first, like I've done here. Then substitute your points in brackets. Point 2, we notice that y is 8 and x is negative 4. Now we're going to substitute point 1. Point 1, notice that y is minus 4 and x is positive 4. When we have a negative followed by a negative, it will become a positive. So negative becomes a positive. Negative 4 minus 4 on a calculator will not give me 0. It will give me minus 8. And so we'll get negative 12 over 8. But that's not the answer. We'll need to simplify the fraction. Punch it into your calculator and press equal to. It'll do it for you. It'll give us negative 3 over 2. And you will get a mark for the substitution into the formula and also for the answer. So there's 2 marks already. Question 2 says determine the size of angle alpha. So there's angle alpha. Notice that that's an obtuse angle. This means the answer has to be more than 90 degrees. Now don't forget that all you have to do is say tan alpha is equal to your gradient. That's the formula to get that angle of inclination. To make alpha subject of the formula, this means I will have to take tan over to the other side. On your calculator, shift tan. It'll say tan to the minus 1 on the screen. Then open brackets, negative 3 over 2, close bracket. You are going to get a negative answer. And to your negative answer, you are going to add 180 degrees. And your final answer is 123,69 degrees. And there is a quick 3 marks there. So now you already have 5. In the next question, it is saying determine the line parallel to DE, passing through points F, also passing through the points minus 10 and 5. So determine whether the line parallel to DE, this line here, which is parallel to DE, which passes definitely through F. The question is asking, does it also pass also passing through point that? Okay, so they're asking, does it pass through this point? Okay, so they want to know, determine whether the line that is parallel to DE passing through points F, does it also pass through points minus 10 and 5. Now they did tell us that the lines are parallel. So let's see if we can work this one out. Do note that both parallel lines have exactly the same gradients. So what we can do, we can use that point that they gave us. We can use this point, substitute it into the formula, and let's see if we get exactly the same gradients. If not, this means it doesn't pass through that point. This would be the easiest approach. So start off with the formula, right? But notice, because it's only 4 marks, there's probably not going to be a mark for the formula. So substitute the points given, which is point F, which is -8 and -2. Substitute that point. Right, so that's the substitution. -8 is y, -2. Notice y is always on top. But when writing the coordinate, x is first. Do note that. So x is -2, y is -8. So substituting that point, and the other point they gave us is this one here, -10 and 5. Now I'm going to say 5 and -10 because y is on top. Do your maths there on your calculator. 5 plus 8, how much do you get? 13. And then we have -10 minus -2. So that's going to give us a plus in the center. Okay? And then we can have a -13/8. So notice the gradients are not the same. So since we worked it out with that point and the gradients are not the same, this means that that point -10 and 5 does not fall on that line. Okay? If they gave us the point and we substituted it here, and our answer was a -3/2, then we'd conclude, because the gradient is the same as in the diagram, the gradients are the same, this means that that point that's given would be on the same line. But notice, in this case, we got a different answer. And because we have a different answer and not the same as m is equal to -3/2, this means that that line, that point is not on that line. That point is not on that line. I hope that makes sense. Now, for argument's sense, you could have worked it out also this way. You could have substituted the gradient that's the same, have y2 over x2 plus 8 plus 2. You say y plus 8. Don't forget, negative is plus 8, negative plus 2. Right, then making y2 subjects of the formula, you would take this plus 8 over to the other side. It will become -8. So we can see y2 is -11. x2, take this this plus 2 over to the other side, will become -2 and -2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So the coordinate that does fit on that line would be 0 and 11. Okay, so 0 and -11. That would be the point that is on that line. Okay, would be there somewhere. Okay. So 0 and -11 would be here somewhere. So if you extend that line going down, notice you're going to get a y-intercept, which would be x is 0, y is -11. Notice the question's not asking for that, okay? The second part, the argument sense. I'm just putting it in, okay? Next question, they want the area of triangle D, E, and F. The area of that triangle. Okay. Now the only way you can calculate the area, you have to know the formula for the area of a triangle. The basic triangle, like grade 8 and 9, will be half base times height. So here's a right angle triangle, meaning you can use that formula, half base times height. That means you're going to need the base and you're going to need the height. Now any line can be the base and the height. Don't worry about that, because it's a right angle triangle. So this could be a base, that could be a height, or the other way around. Makes no difference, right? So you're going to need to use the distance formula to calculate this distance and that distance. Now the distance formula is the difference of the x's. If you want to call it x2 minus x1, it makes no difference. Those are not squares, okay? So this is not meaning square it. Using the distance formula, right, we have the square root sign on both of them. This is the distance formula, and then you're going to subtract the difference of the x's, subtract the difference of the y's. Do note that this 2 does not mean squared, okay? It's just saying 0.1 and 0.2. That's what it means. So if you swap this around and put x2 minus x1, it's going to come to the same thing. All you have to do is substitute 0.1 where 0.1 goes into the formula. So substitute 1 point at a time, then you will not put the numbers in the wrong place. If you swap the numbers around, switching them, using the x from the wrong coordinate, then you will not get the right answer. Please follow carefully here, okay? This is easy, just have to concentrate. Now we will substitute our points. So notice I chose point E as 0.1 and F as 0.2. You can do it the other way and see if you get the same answer. Right, now notice that the x must go where x is, okay, of that point. Let's substitute. 0.1 is substituted. x1, y1. There's the point. x1 is 4, right? y1 is -4. There's it there, where x1, y1 is 0.1. Hope this makes sense. Now we're going to substitute 0.2. Why did I put the negatives in black? Because why the formula has negatives. Now children don't even learn the formula properly. Please use the right thing there. Okay, it's negatives. Now let's substitute the next point. Notice that x2 is -2. y2 is -8. Now on your calculator, you are going to say 4 minus -2 in brackets. See what the answer is. It is 6. So that is 6 squared. Now the other bracket will be -4 minus -8. In other words, it's -4 plus 8, which is going to give me 4 squared. And my answer there will be root 52. Right, next we are working out the gradient of DE. So I chose the points again. Again, I have to use that point and that point to find that gradient. Notice that. Now, I tend to always use the highest point as number 1. Okay, it's just something I do. So let's substitute it there. The highest point as number 1. So you can try it the other way around. Call your number 2, your number 1 point as 4 and -4. Try it out. See, you'll get the same answer as me. Just so you have confidence, right? So our point ones, we notice that x1 is -4 and y1 is 8. Okay, now do point 2. Notice that point 2, the x is 4, and notice y2 is -4. Now do your brackets on a calculator. -4 minus 4 equals, that will give us -8 squared. And then we have 8 minus -4, that will give us 12 squared. Do that all in your calculator and get the final answer. And that will give you square root 208. Next, you can substitute those into the formula for area. So area is a half b times h, half times the two answers that you have, which is the 52, root 52, and the root 208. Notice you could also use the simplified surds. Your simplified surds, there will be 2 root 13, and the other one 4 root 13. That's what your calculator would be saying. I'm not using a calculator here, right? So punch that into your calculator and see what you have. I'm going to have to get my calculator for this one. Right, so punching in into our calculator, I get 52 as a final answer. And so area is equal to 52 units squared. Right, and that is all of question 1 of 2023. Next we are going to 2024, also question 1, analytical geometry. Right, so we're on to November 2024. It says the diagram shows triangle ABC with the points A, B, and C. CA is produced to form the angle of inclination. So CA is extended to form that angle of inclination. Notice that is less than 90 degrees. So your answer will be an acute answer. Right? M is the midpoint. So M is central of A and C. Okay, so M is the middle, the center of the line AC with those points given. Determine the gradients of AC. Do note that all these papers have a very similar trend, so not too difficult. Very similar to the first one. Right, calculating the gradients of AC. So we're going to use that formula, and then we're going to substitute our points. Point A I'll call point 2, and point C I will call point 1. So substituting point 2, which is in this position, y is on top, x is below. And then substituting the second point, notice x is positive 4 and y is negative 4 on the top. Right, so that's going to give us 0 plus 4, because a negative is a positive. And then 6 minus 4 is 2 in the denominator. 4 divided by 2 is equal to 2. And just to get the gradients, it's 2 marks. 1 mark for the substitution and the final answer. Next they want the angle, right? So same like the previous example, 1.2, find the angle. So we know the formula is tan theta is equal to m. Now we're going to find theta, and we know our m was 2. Okay, so to bring tan over, shift tan. On your calculator, 63,43. Right, and 63,43 is the final answer. So for all of this, 2 marks. At this stage, you have 4 already. The next question says determine the length of BC. This is question 1.3. Determine the length of BC. So our 2 points, you can call them 1 and 2. And then you're going to substitute the points where x1 is and y1. You will substitute point 1. Notice that x1 is 3 and y1 is minus 1. And then the formula has a negative on both of them. Okay, so do note I made a mistake there. I wrote a plus for some weird reason, but the formulas both have negatives. Okay, and then x2 will be 4 and minus 1, right? So x2 will be positive 4 and y2 is minus 4. Right, now on your calculator, 3 minus 4, that'll give us minus 1. Don't forget it's squared. And then on the other side we have minus 1 minus minus 4. That will give us a positive 3 squared. All of that on your calculator, you should get an answer of square root of 10. And now you have another 2 marks for the substitution being correct and the final answer another 2. At this point you have 6. Now to find the center of anything, it'll always be divided by 2. So if you have a full distance and you divide it by 2, you're going to find the center of it. So here it's going to be add the 2 x's and divide by 2 to find the center, add the 2 y's, divide by 2 to get the center. And that's the formula for the midpoint. Do notice that the formulas have plus for them for the midpoints. So I'm not going to write the points again, they're on the diagram. So A is 6 and 0. So x is 6 and y is 0. That's point 1, the one on top. And then the other point is 4 and minus 4. Next we're going to add that up. 6 plus 4 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. And 0 plus minus 4 means 0 minus 4. 0 minus 4 is minus 4 divided by 2 is minus 2. And so the coordinates, the x and the y for point M, the x and the y for point M, x is 5, and y is minus 2 or negative 2. And then you have another 2 marks. At this point, you have a whole 8. And so most times it's a mark for the x and the y value. And there you have 2 marks. Sometimes it'll be for the substitution and then the final answer. The next question says, determine the equation of the line. That means y is equal to the equation of the line that is perpendicular to C and A. Not BA, CA, right? So determine the line that is perpendicular to CA. So y is equal to mx plus c. You already have the x and the y value, substituting it into y is equal to mx plus c. And you do have the gradient, okay? Now the gradient of CA is 2. Now we calculated the gradient in 1.1 and we know the answer there was 2. The gradient was 2. So now we know the formula for perpendicular lines. They're not equal like parallel lines. But parallel lines, like the previous example, m1 is equal to m2. So they have the same gradients. But when they're perpendicular, the gradients when multiplied is equal to minus 1 as seen on the screen. So substitute a value of 2 to find out the new gradient. You can put it anywhere there, okay? Either m1 or m2, makes no difference. So substitute a 2. Now I need to solve for m2. Do you see it? So that I can find out what is the perpendicular gradient. Dividing both sides by 2 and solving for m2, I get negative a half. So this means that the red line's gradient is negative a half. So substituting it for m, I can now substitute my x, which is 5, and my y, which is minus 2. Next, I can do the maths and solve for c. So use your calculator. A negative half times 5, what do you get? I will then move that negative 5 over 2 to the left hand side and solve for c. Notice that a negative becomes a positive. So on your calculator, 5 over 2 minus 2, what do you get? You get a half. Substitute it right back where you see c in the original question. And now what was your gradient of your new line? Okay, we're talking about the red line. It was negative half, right? And that's your equation. Y is equal to negative half x plus half. Okay, simple, simple, simple. So you would have 12 if you just had question 1 correct. 12 or 14 marks on average. Okay, and that would give you a nice, good start. We're still in November 2024, paper 2, right? So in the diagram below, 0 is the center of the circle, defined by x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. They say PR is a tangent to the circle at point P. So there's point P, and this line is a tangent to the circle. Remember that that line is 90 degrees with the radius coming from the center of the circle to point P, right? And they will meet each other at 90 degrees. That's a tangent. Right, point S is an intercept on the x-axis. Point S cuts the x-axis, intercepts, and point R is also an intercept on line PR. They say determine the equation of the circle. So notice they gave you the standard form up there. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. Now at this point, there's only one point that is touching that circle. Now functions, you have to remember, all you have to do is substitute the point that is on the equation. So notice the equation of the circle is this here. This means I can only substitute that point. Maths is not so difficult. Put that point, that is x and that is y. Put it in. So plugging all of that into your calculator, you get the answer of 25. So r squared is equal to 25. So where I see r squared in the original standard form, I'm going to put 25 there. And then make y the subject of the formula. So plus x squared will become minus x squared. Square root both sides. Now, something there is missing. Who can tell us? the plus and the minus. Remember, when you square root, you get two answers, a plus answer and a negative answer. And that is the equation of the circle. Right, so for all of that, 2 marks. So 1 mark for the substitution and 1 mark for the final answer. The next question says, write down the coordinates of S. Notice that r squared was 25. So if r squared is 25, this means the radius is 5. Now remember that 0 is always center of the circle. So that means it is 5 units going that way, 5 units going that way. Let's go to our diagram. From there to there is 5 units. Is that an X movement? Yes or no? From there to there, is that an X movement? Correct. So that means that will be minus 5 going that direction. So X is definitely minus 5. And all X-intercepts have a Y value of 0. So our coordinate there is minus 5 and 0. And just for that, it is 2 marks. 1 mark for each. The next question. Determine the equation of the tangent in the form. So 2 and 3, determine the equation of that tangent. Okay, in the form y is equal to. So notice that the tangent is a straight line. That's going to give us y is equal to mx plus c. And then we can substitute the point P. Notice that y is minus 3 and x is a positive 4. We need to find the gradient, which is m. Now notice that it's going from the center to there, right? Which will be the radius from there to there. But our gradients in our question will be going this way. So the first thing to do is to find out what this gradient is of the radius. And if we can get the gradient of the radius, it's perpendicular. This means we can find the gradient of the tangent. So let's go and find the gradient of the radius first. Now the gradient of the radius, which is OP, notice that the center of the circle, the coordinates there are 0 and 0 for the center of the circle. So this is why I have 0 and 0 substituted. Then the point P will be y on top and x at the bottom. In the numerator we have minus 3 and in the denominator we have 4. So minus 3 over 4 is our gradient. Do note that that is the gradient of the radius. We need to find now the gradient of the tangent. So we remember the formula from the previous example, m1 times m2 equals minus 1 for gradients that are perpendicular. Substituting m1 as minus 3 over 4, and then you solve for m2. So because I was multiplying by a negative 3 over 4, right? I was multiplying by a negative 3 over 4. This means on the other side, I will divide by a negative 3 over 4. The opposite operation. Right, punching it into your calculator, you'll get 4 over 3. I will then substitute that back into my original equation for m. So m was 4 over 3. Do your maths on that and solve for c. So 4 times 4 is 16. Divided by 3. Take it over to the left hand side. It's going to be negative 16 over 3. All of that on your calculator. I'm running out of space on my board here. Forgive me. So y is equal to 4 over 3x. Notice we did calculate the gradient as being 4 over 3 for the tangent. Notice that the gradient is positive, right? It's going in this direction from quadrant 1 to quadrant 3 direction. That is positive, right? And so now, all we have to do is write in the last number, which is a c value, which is minus 25 over 3. And now we have the answer for the equation of the tangent, right? And for that there is 4 marks. So with all that work, 4 marks you have there. So up to that point you have a total of 8 marks. So now they say write down what is point R. So point R is here, which is the y-intercept, and we calculated that in the last question. So point R, we know that the y value was negative 25 over 3, as calculated, who can give us the x value? So if that's a y-intercept, who can give us the x value? And so if you had that right, the x value will be 0. That's 9 marks already. So 9 and 12 is 21 marks already. So just learn question 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 properly. And you can do well. Right, 2.2's question says this. They say express the equation in the form of what's the parabola, right? So the parabola is x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. So this, sorry, I see the word parabola. Express it in this equation. It's called an ellipse, right? Elliptical, oblong, right? Oblong circle, out of shape circle, right? So here we go. So let's go and substitute our values. Right, so they say express it into that equation. So all you do is square root the numbers at the denominator, square root them, and write them in. So the square root of 1 is 1. And the square root of 9 is 3. Don't forget the squares. Okay, and that's how simple it is. Remember, drawing the ellipse is always central. So now we're doing 2, 2, 2. And you take your x value and you write it on both sides of the center. Remember, it's always centralized here. So minus 1 and 1. And then your y value is minus 3 and positive 3. Okay, how do I get this? Simple. Look at x, what number's below? It's 1, right? So it's minus 1, 1. Look at y, what number's below? 3. So it's minus 3 plus 3. Who can't do this? And then make a nice good curve. Not like mine that looks like a potato, not an ellipse. Okay, so draw yours nicely. Okay, take your time so it looks nice and good. Remember, you have to put the labels. If you don't put the labels, you'll get no mark. So you have to write those values of plus 3, minus 1, and 1. You must do that. Okay, so the marks here will be to show the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts, and you'll get 2 marks. 1 mark is for the shape, the other mark is for the intercepts. Don't forget to include the y and the x on the axes. Right, and that's a quick another 3 marks for all of that. Okay, for all of that, another 3. This will give you 12 marks for this whole question. So if you could get question 1 all correct, question 2 all correct, you have 24 out of 150. 24 out of 150 is 16%. That's just question 1 and 2. So if you can do question 3 and 4 all correct, you will have 32%. And that's all you need to pass. So the question is very similar to the previous example. This is November 2023. It says determine the equation of the circle passing through J. This means you need to find R. In the previous question, they gave this x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. Notice in this question, they didn't give it, but it should be on the formula sheet. Right, so substitute your point. 12 is x and y is 9. Plug it into the calculator and get the value of r squared. R squared is going to be 225. Next, you want to make y squared subject to the formula, and then y subject to the formula. Bringing a plus x squared over, it will become minus x squared, then square root both sides to get y. Notice you will always get a plus minus answer when square rooting, and that is 211 completed. They say complete the following. Right, so MOJ is the center from 0 all the way to there will be OJ, and JK is the tangent. So we know that those two are equal to minus 1 because they are perpendicular to each other. The radius is perpendicular to the tangent. At this point, you have 3 marks, right? Next, they want you to determine the equation of JK in the form y is equal to. In other words, they want the equation of the tangent, 4 marks. Same like the previous example. So, all we're going to do is substitute into y is equal to mx plus c. But before we do that, we will need to find the gradient. Right, so using the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, we are finding the gradient of OJ, which is the radius, okay? We know that the other point is going to be 0, 0 in the center. And J's coordinates are x is 12 and y is 9. And that's equivalent to 3 over 4, which means the gradient of OJ is a positive 3 over 4. Who can tell me what the other gradient is going to be? And you can find the other gradients by using m1 times m2 is equal to minus 1 and substitute m1 as 3 over 4. Solving for m2, we'll bring 3 over 4 to the other side times 3 over 4. The opposite is divide by 3 over 4. You will get an answer of negative 4 over 3. We will then substitute that m as negative 4 over 3 because we are trying to find the equation of the tangent. Notice this line goes the opposite way. Right, so that line goes the opposite way. So it'll be a negative gradient. Can you see that? Going in the opposite direction. This way is a positive gradient. This way is a negative gradient. So our answer is correct thus far. So let's go and substitute this point here. Where we're going to put this point for y and x, okay? So y is 9 and x is 12. Do your maths on that using your calculator. Minus 4 over 3 times 12. You're going to get a negative 16. Take it over to the other side. It's going to become plus 16. So c is equal to 25. Don't forget we must find the equation of the tangent. Y is equal to. So we said it's a negative 4 over 3x plus 25. All of that is 4 marks. And so up to this stage, you have 7 marks already. The next question, given this, same like the previous example, they say express it in the form like that. All you're going to do is square root the numbers in the denominators, square root them, write them as the a and the b value, sorted, then draw the graph. And all you're going to do is write it as root 11 and then put it in brackets and square it. The square root of 64 is 8. Then you're going to draw it. Which is the x? The x is root 11. So now you have root 11 on both sides, and then you can have 8 on both sides. Plus 8 and minus 8. Then you can draw it. Don't forget to put the x and the y axes. And there you have it, another 2 marks. So for question 2.2, there's 3 over there. And in total, you have 10 for this question. Right. So question 1 and 2 is very easy to do. I would say practice only question 1 and 2 through 4 papers, and once you have that knowledge, then go on to 3 and 4 and do 4 papers getting that right. You would have quite a bit to go into exams with.